I returned to the empire I built, ignored, dismissed, yet holding its deepest secrets. As chaos unfolds from my warnings unheeded, I face betrayal, loss, and the reckoning only I can deliver. This is my fight to reclaim what was mine and remind them who truly controls the system. I want to share my story with you. I never imagined I'd stand in that vast, gleaming lobby again, my worn leather briefcase in hand and a heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The polished marble floors reflected the bright LED lights overhead, casting harsh white beams across my ancient wool overcoat. Everywhere I looked, there were screens broadcasting the company logo, its sleek lines mocking me with their perfection. This was the empire I built, every brick and circuit and line of code, once a testament to my sweat and sleepless nights. Now it felt like a foreign cathedral where I was neither worshipped nor remembered. My cane clicked against the marble as I took a step forward, each echo carrying the weight of decades. Security cameras tracked me like I was a burglar, not the pioneer who drafted the original blueprints in a cramped basement. People in tailored suits passed by without a glance, their eyes glued to hollow devices that pulsed with glowing notifications. I almost laughed at the irony. Once I taught them how to build these devices. Now they saw me as nothing more than a relic, a vagrant ghost of some forgotten past. I approached the reception desk, a monolithic slab of dark metal that looked like it belonged on a starship. The young woman behind it barely looked up when I cleared my throat. "I'm Arthur Wynne," I said, my voice gravelly from years of disuse in public spaces. She cut me off with a tilt of her perfectly manicured eyebrow. "Mr. Wynne, we're aware of your history, but this is a private campus. You can't just wander in." Her tone was polite but icy, a bureaucratic steel shield that shut me out more effectively than any locked door. In that moment, something inside me snapped, but I bit back the retort that formed on my trembling lips. I managed a small nod and stepped away, my chest tight with both indignation and a strange sense of exhilaration. How easily they dismissed me, their arrogance laid bare like a festering wound. I wondered if they even knew who I truly was, if they realized that the foundation of every server farm, every patented algorithm, every gleaming tower they congregated in was carved from my mind. I wandered deeper into the complex, following directional signs that pointed to the executive wing. Each signpost made me shiver. I remembered drafting those floor plans with a fountain pen and a ruler, hiding blueprints under floorboards in the same hallways I now tread. I paused outside a glass door etched with titles: Chief Innovations Office, Senior Leadership. Through the glass, I could see a group of young executives laughing at something on a tablet. Their laughter echoed off the walls like a taunt. I cleared my throat again until they noticed me. Their smiles froze. A tall man with sharp cheekbones and a haircut so precise it looked clipped by a machine rose to greet me. He extended a hand, but his eyes were cold and assessing. "Mr. Wynne," he said with forced warmth, "we've read about your contributions. We've automated most functions now. Your presence is appreciated but frankly unnecessary." His voice dripped with condescension. I felt all the memories surge up. Long nights debugging code, stumbling onto solutions no one else imagined, drafting every clause of the corporate charter that now bound them. And here they were, telling me I was obsolete. A spark ignited in my chest, a quiet flame fueled by every snub, every dismissive glance I endured since walking into my own creation. I tilted my head, feigning understanding as if he'd shown me some courtesy. Inside, I was already calculating. I knew where every vulnerability lay, buried in forgotten code and archaic contracts. They boasted of impenetrable firewalls and ironclad policies, yet they hadn't the slightest clue of the Trojan horse sleeping beneath their polished systems. I withdrew my cane, leaning on it as if gathering strength for some impossible feat. "Tell me," I said softly, "do you really believe you built this empire alone?" The executives around him shifted uncomfortably in their designer suits. I let the silence stretch, savoring it like a fine wine. Then I turned and walked away, the click of my cane marking each word I left unsaid. "I will remind you of what you've forgotten." I found myself in a glossy conference room next, walls of tempered glass that showcased the entire operation in one panoramic sweep. Below, cubicles teemed with drones tapping away at keyboards. Above, executive offices floated like glass prisms in the sky. I could almost taste the arrogance in the air, an acrid blend of corporate scent diffusers and overconfidence. I cleared my throat, summoned every ounce of the calm I'd practiced on my lonely walks through the corridors. I was here for one reason: to warn them, to prevent a disaster only I could foresee. I tapped on the glass door and it slid open with a clinical whoosh. A mid-level manager, bright-eyed, starched shirt, a tie that screamed "I belong," looked up from his tablet. He studied me with the polite curiosity one might reserve for a stray cat rummaging through their garden. I offered him a gentle nod. "Excuse me," I said. "There's a flaw in the latest firmware rollout, the cache synchronization protocol." He cut me off with a dismissive wave as though shooing away a bothersome fly. Sir, he said, voice smooth and patronizing, I'm a bit busy reviewing our performance metrics. I'm sure the original specs were solid, but we've modernized everything. Your legacy code is, how shall I put this, irrelevant. He smiled a thin, practiced smile, tapped a few keys on his tablet, and turned his back on me. The slap of finality reverberated in my chest. Irrelevant. The word felt like a betrayal, like someone had stolen my skin and left me as a husk. I swallowed, leaning on my cane, and forced the words out. You're about to push the update live on all your servers. If you do that without patching the timestamp validation or disabling the deprecated backdoor, you're inviting a cascade failure. My voice was steady, but my heart pounded so hard I feared it might break free. He turned around, arching an eyebrow as if I'd uttered a childish riddle. Backdoor deprecated, those terms don't exist in my reports. He flicked his eyes over the sleek interface he trusted more than any human memory. Look, Mr. Wynn, we appreciate your passion, but this is beyond your scope now. Our engineers have run thousands of tests. If you could stick to the alumni tour schedule, we'd be thrilled to have you. He gestured to a printed itinerary laid out on the table, a list of meet and greets with junior developers and commemorative selfies. The indignity hit me like an ice bath. They thought of me as a quaint attraction, a living curiosity they could parade for social media clout. I lowered my gaze to the itinerary and saw my name in the program, Founders Day Photo Op. My rise to power distilled to a 20-second spotlight for company Instagram. I crumpled the paper in my hand and let it drop. The manager's lips tightened. He offered a half-hearted apology that sounded more like a rehearsed jingle than genuine regret. He was about to turn away again when something in me cracked. The man who had once gripped the reins of innovation, who had drafted the first 1,000 lines of code that transformed the world, refused to be patronized 1 second longer. I straightened my shoulders, feeling years of dust and neglect fall off me. You can laugh, I said, voice low and dangerous, but when your systems blow up in spectacular fashion, don't pretend I didn't warn you. He tilted his head, amusement dancing in his eyes. Systems don't just blow up, Mr. Wynn, he said. They're engineered to scale. You're outdated, your memory, your methods, technology moved on. He tapped on his tablet to dismiss me and didn't notice my lips curl into a small, knowing smile. Let them see me as obsolete. It only made the reckoning sweeter. I left him there, the click of my cane echoing down the corridor like hoofbeats on an empty street. Behind me, the glass door sealed shut. I felt the weight of their contempt press against my back, but instead of crumbling, I felt something lean and hungry awaken within me. They thought they had silenced the old man, reduced him to a footnote in their success story. They didn't realize I held the master key to every lock they prized. As I walked away, I replayed the manager's words in my mind, a perverse meditation. Stick to the alumni tour schedule. Oh, I'd stick to it, right into the heart of the system where they believed their arrogance made them invincible. And there, piece by piece, I'd dismantle their empire with the very flaws they dismissed. They'd remember me then not as a quaint relic, but as the architect who always knew where to strike. I slipped into the corner booth of a quiet cafe just down the block, the scent of roasted beans and cinnamon pastries wrapping around me like an old quilt. The barista, used to regulars but not to ghostly figures like me, gave a polite nod as she set down a steaming mug of black coffee. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the bitterness ground me. Around me, soft jazz played on hidden speakers while patrons tapped away on laptops, oblivious to the storm brewing in my mind. I pulled from my coat pocket a weathered leather notebook, its edges frayed from years of handling. The pages inside were yellowed, filled with scribbles and diagrams that had once been the blueprint for a revolution in technology. My hands trembled slightly as I opened to a blank spread. I tapped the pen against my chin, recalling the first time I drafted the kill switch, a hidden protocol buried beneath layer upon layer of encrypted code, written in a language only I fully understood. In the margin of the page, I sketched the outline of a server cluster, marking the master node with a small, discrete star. Beneath that star, I drew a series of arrowed lines representing the data flow through subsidiary modules. I labeled each pathway: authentication, synchronization, logging, encryption. Almost invisibly, I penciled a tiny circle at the heart of the cluster. That circle was the kill switch, a dormant sequence that could initiate a cascade of controlled shutdowns, severing connections and corrupting data in microseconds. I sipped my coffee, the liquid warmth fueling my memory. I remembered coding the switch late one sleepless night, driven by a sense of responsibility. I'd built the world's first self-healing network, but I also needed a way to pull the plug if it ever fell into the wrong hands or if it ever ran amok. So I embedded a failsafe deep under the corporate charter's digital spine, a protocol triggered by a sequence of otherwise meaningless logins. No one else knew the sequence, not the board members, not the engineers who prided themselves on their modern expertise. Fingers tracing the ink server cluster, I listed potential triggers. A date stamp matching my birth date reversed, a specific checksum embedded in a dummy log entry, an innocuous command masquerading as an internal health check. I considered how the system's upgrade last quarter had deactivated some old pathways, but missed the kill switch entirely because it was coded in a subroutine that never surfaced in version control. Knowing their arrogance, I realized they wouldn't search in the legacy archives. Those within it who knew of my original drafts had all been eased out or retired. My mind raced through contingencies. If I triggered the switch too abruptly, they might isolate the failure, patch the hole, and shrug off the disruption as a temporary glitch. No, I needed a cascade, a domino effect that would ripple through every data center. I sketched a timeline on the opposite page. T-6 hours, implant a crafted login via remote proxy. T-4 hours, inject a corrupted synchronization packet. T-2 hours, initiate the kill switch. T0, watch the empire tremble. I jotted down line after line of pseudocode, fragments of commands that would pass beneath their radar. Initiate sequence 897X became my mantra. I underlined it 3 times and drew an arrow pointing to the kill switch circle. The plan was ruthlessly simple and elegantly cruel. I paused to let the gravity of it settle, my heart hammering not with fear but with the pure rush of inevitability. They dismissed me as senile, they'd laughed at my warnings. Now they'd learned that the architect's blueprint is etched in his mind, long after the world forgets his name. Across the cafe, a young woman ordered a latte and scrolled on her phone. I imagined her working for the very company I created, tapping away at code I once wrote. She'd be the first to feel the tremor in her terminal as the corrupted packet slammed into her IDE. I pressed the pen to paper again, totaling up the number of affected nodes, thousands, maybe tens of thousands. The potential damage was vast, but so was the lesson they needed. I folded the notebook closed and tucked it into my coat. The plan was set in ink now, more solid than any pact signed on paper or etched in stone. I stood, cane clicking against the tiled floor, and paid the barista with a few crumpled bills. Leaving the cafe, I savored the tension coiling in my chest. They'd thought I was an albatross, a decaying relic. Soon they'd find out exactly who still held the master key. As I walked back toward the glass towers, I felt the ancient power of creation thrumming through my veins. The kill switch lay dormant, waiting for the moment I'd turn the world upside down and remind them that I'm the one who built the ground they stand on. I slipped back into the shadows of the campus late that night, the city lights beyond the glass walls fading into a blur as I focused on my objective. I didn't need confrontation or a dramatic break-in. All I needed was the living memory of every line I ever wrote. I found an unused terminal in an abandoned maintenance closet, its power light blinking like a heartbeat. Dust and cobwebs coated the keyboard, but when I pressed the keys, the screen flickered to life. Like slipping into an old coat, it welcomed me. My fingers hovered above the keyboard as I summoned an alias email account I'd set up years ago. It was tied to one of those long-forgotten domains that expired without ceremony, but I'd mirrored its DNS entry just in time. With that ghost address, I drafted a short, innocuous message to the security team: critical vulnerability detected in backup authentication module. Patch immediately to avoid potential data corruption. Details attached. I attached a file named Urgent Fixzip, a carefully crafted archive that contained an exploit targeting the module I had designed, but that no one ever audited because they thought it obsolete. I hit send. The message left no fingerprints, no personal metadata, just a corporate alert flagged as high priority by the automated intrusion detection system. I watched the terminal's log feed scroll by, showing the mail server acknowledging receipt. Mission 1 complete. With a faint grin, I closed the lid and pocketed the device. Next, I dialed a number I'd memorized decades ago, the cell phone of Clara H. Wang, my co-founder and once my closest ally. I heard the ringtone echo through her answering machine before her voice, cautious but curious, crackled through. "Arthur, is that you?" she asked, her tone threaded with disbelief. I reminded her of the backdoor we buried in the old codebase, the failsafe we swore never to use. I spoke in hushed tones, reciting the trigger commands and current server addresses that still ran the legacy processes. Clara hesitated, then whispered, "I'll see what I can do." We hung up before anyone could trace the call. My final move that night was the simplest, logging into the dormancy cluster with an old administrator password I'd implanted during the first network rollout. I typed it in, one keystroke at a time, savoring each letter. The company name reversed my middle name the year we launched our pilot. It had never been changed because modern IT teams never considered the old network worth the trouble. Instantly, I had root access. The terminal prompt shifted, signaling my authority. I navigated to the backup module and initiated the sequence that Clara and I had designed. An automatic failover that would replicate the exploit-laden patch across every node. Then I activated the kill switch routine, leaving it poised like a coiled spring set to release under the next system heartbeat. I watched the logs in real time. Connections blinked red, then yellow, then vanished altogether. The exploit file propagated through the mesh network with ruthless efficiency, each compromised server reporting back before going dark. I killed the session and backed away as the terminal rebooted itself, now locked down by the very failsafe I'd reawakened. Outside the closet, the campus was silent, unaware that the first domino had fallen. I walked away through empty corridors, adrenaline coursing through me. In the distance, I could almost hear the faint ripple of alerts cascading through the company's monitoring dashboards. A quiet smile played at my lips. They'd think it a technical glitch, a blip in their polished system. They descramble to locate the root cause, and when they dug into legacy code, they'd find only fragments, no clear path to recovery without my key. Clara and I would reconvene tomorrow, she in her secluded hideout within the old R&D lab now converted into a museum, and me somewhere in the city. Together, we held the missing pieces to restore the system or destroy it entirely if they forced our hand. As I slipped out of the building and into the night, I felt the familiar thrill of creation and destruction merging. The empire I built was beginning to tremble, all because an old man remembered the secrets he once crafted and refused to let them sleep forever. I woke before dawn, the city still wrapped in a pale hush, and checked my phone. Dozens of unread alerts blinked on my screen, clients reporting failed transactions, support tickets skyrocketing, automated systems rebooting in endless loops. I smiled and poured myself a cup of coffee, the steam curling like a signal flare to the early sky. Let the chaos begin. By mid-morning, the company's sleek social media feed was a disaster zone. A public product demo had gone live without warning, only to reveal a slideshow of corrupted images and frozen video streams. Viewers watched in bemused horror as the logo pixelated into an unrecognizable smear. Hashtags like epic fail and tech meltdown trended within minutes. The boardroom lit up with panicked messages. What the hell is happening? Is this a hack? Find a patch now. Meanwhile, customer support lines clogged with angry users. Automated chatbots looped the same apology. We're experiencing technical difficulties. Please hold, please hold, please hold. I sat in my apartment overlooking the city and sipped my coffee slowly. Each slurp felt like a countdown to the next explosion. I replayed the old logs in my mind, how the exploit had slipped past their modern intrusion detection system, how the kill switch had silently severed key dependencies, how every repair patch only deepened the corruption. They prided themselves on airtight security, but arrogance had blinded them to legacy weaknesses. And now the ghost of their founder was haunting every server. Back at headquarters, mid-level managers huddled in glass-walled conference rooms, screens glowing with error codes no one understood. The young man who dismissed me 2 days earlier now barked orders at his team, his voice cracking with desperation. "Roll back to last stable build," he shouted. "We need root access, anybody find the backdoor." Engineers pored over scripts and logs, eyes red from sleepless nights. They patched one module only to see another crumble in response. It was like playing whack-a-mole with a hydra. Every fix spawned 2 new problems. In the product support center, I imagined the junior developer, bright-eyed and eager, slamming her laptop shut in frustration as her terminal froze mid-debug. She'd glance up at the clock, realize it was nearly midnight, and wonder why this build was worse than any before. She didn't know her own ignorance had been the catalyst. Not yet. I felt a pang of something like pity, but it passed quickly. This was justice. News outlets smelled blood and pounced. Headlines screamed, tech giant paralyzed by unexplained glitch, crisis at the core, board in turmoil, founder's ghost alleged in cyber attack. Analysts speculated about state-sponsored hacking, insider sabotage, divine punishment, anything but the truth. The leadership issued a press release blaming third-party code, promising transparency once we've restored full operations. They sounded like traitors confessing under duress, but the public remained hungry for more spectacle. I scrolled through the headlines with a wry chuckle, then shut off my phone. Watching them scramble was almost delicious. They'd spent years erasing my legacy, rewriting the narrative that they'd built this empire from scratch. Now that empire was crumbling. Each system failure, each stuttering server, each broken API was a monument to their hubris, and a reminder that I, the builder, held the ultimate control. At noon, a friend in the old guard sent me a brief encrypted message. "Looks like plan succeeded. No one's close to root. Need next instructions?" I tapped back. "Hold, let them flail. We strike at golden hour." I knew exactly what would happen next. Board members would storm in, demand emergency meetings, propose half-baked solutions, only to be shot down by cascading errors. They'd threaten layoffs, promise incentives, then realize they had no idea how to fix the mess. And all the while, I'd remain the silent conductor of this orchestra of chaos. By evening, the campus was a ghost town. Security guards propped open doors so frantic employees could sprint between server rooms and meeting halls. Overhead, the lights seemed dimmer, the silence heavier. No one dared admit they were outmatched by an unseen foe. In the solitude of my apartment, I gazed at the city lights and felt a cold pride. The first domino had toppled, the rest would follow in perfect harmony. Tomorrow, they'd beg for help. They'd call me back, groveling, desperate to restore what they'd so recklessly dismantled. And I'd decide whether to grant them salvation or watch the final collapse. For now, though, I simply savored the moment, knowing that the architect always remembers where the weaknesses lie and takes his time delivering the reckoning. I didn't expect the summons to arrive so soon. The encrypted message lit up my old phone at dawn. Meet me at the north stairwell entrance. You're our only chance. No names, no formalities, just desperation in every syllable. I folded the note and slipped it into my coat pocket, the paper crisp with urgency. It was exactly what I'd predicted, their arrogance finally giving way to panic. The company I built was hemorrhaging credibility, and they had nowhere left to turn but to the crazy old man. I arrived at the northern stairwell, its concrete steps stained with years of scuff marks and rumors of midnight smoke breaks. A young woman in company-branded attire waited by the railing, her eyes ringed with exhaustion and fear. She looked more like a lost child than a corporate employee. She barely introduced herself before blurting it out. I'm Emily Rivera, support tier 2. You emailed me about the vulnerability. I believed you, nobody else would listen. But now everything's falling apart. They're blaming us, the account folks. There, she swallowed and looked at me as if I held the cure for a plague. They want you back, the board headquarters, they've approved an emergency consultation. They'll fly you in by private jet, anything you need. I studied her face, the fatigue, the desperation, the hint of hope. She reminded me of myself decades ago, staking everything on a dream nobody else understood. I tapped my cane against the stairwell floor twice, a silent measure of time. They want me back, I said, voice weary. After dismissing every warning, every plea, she flinched as if struck but nodded. Yes, they have no other options. I closed my eyes and inhaled the stale air. The north stairwell had been part of the original blueprint, an emergency exit we designed to double as a secure comms conduit in case of disaster. Back then, every corridor and beam was drawn with purpose. Now the world I built teetered on the edge of ruin. I felt the familiar spark of resolve ignite. Tell me when, I said. Emily checked her watch. 2 hours, jet leaves at 9. They'll have ground transport waiting at the helipad. I nodded. Good, make sure there's no media circus. I want silence. She exhaled with relief. Understood, I'll get you ready. I walked away, each step echoing like a drumbeat of fate. I'd been summoned from exile not for tribute or nostalgia, but because the system required its architect to save it. Funny how respect is often eclipsed by necessity. Back in my apartment, I gathered what I needed. My leather-bound notebook, a fresh fountain pen, and the scarf I wore when drafting those foundational protocols. The world outside my windows glowed with indifferent life, cars weaving through dawn traffic, coffee shops opening their doors, unaware that the empire built on their technology was crumbling. I felt a pang of something like nostalgia, but tempered by the urgency of the moment. I was about to step back into the place that spat me out, armed with the only weapon they couldn't replicate, my own mind. Emily met me at the corporate helipad, eyes bright with anxiety. She guided me through the lush grounds to the private jet. On the tarmac, a sleek black helicopter stood waiting, its rotors humming quietly as if impatient. I climbed aboard, my cane leaving faint scratches on the metal steps. Inside, the pilot nodded respectfully but kept his distance. I took the window seat and watched the city shrink away as we lifted off. During the flight, Emily relayed snippets of the board's latest status updates. Emergency meetings extended through the night, external consultants thrown out for lack of progress, shareholders demanding answers, the CEO's resignation rumored by tomorrow. She spoke in clipped sentences as if afraid to waste any breath. I listened, silent and observant. The rotors thumped a steady rhythm, syncing with the rapid pulse in my chest. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. At headquarters, the boardroom doors were flung open before we landed. A dozen executives sat around the table, gaunt and hollow-eyed. Their confident suits were disheveled, their polished presentations lay in tatters on screens behind them. The moment I stepped in, a hush fell over the room. No applause, no pleasantries, only blank stares and the weight of collective guilt. The interim CEO rose, voice trembling. Mr. Wynn, thank you for coming. We apologize for how we treated you. His eyes flicked to Emily, who stood off to the side like a pleading witness. We need your help to restore the system and the company's reputation. I leaned on my cane, letting the silence stretch until it felt unbearable. Then I spoke. I warned you, I offered solutions, you mocked me, now the entire operation is at my mercy. Do you still want my help? The CEO swallowed hard. Yes, please, I nodded once sharply. Then show me the network blueprints, give me access to the control systems, and get me everyone who knows those secret protocols. Their eagerness to comply was palpable, almost pitiful. They had summoned me. Now they would have to listen. As I moved to the head of the table, the boardroom lights felt too bright, the silence too thick. But I was ready, inked pages in my hand, decades of memory guiding every step. They'd brought the architect back from the shadows, and now they'd discover that you never trifle with the man who built the kingdom. I settled into the high-backed leather chair at the head of the boardroom table, my notebook open and pen poised. The executives clustered around me looked like deer caught in headlights, pale faces, shallow breaths, eyes darting between the flickering network diagrams on the screen and me. I leaned forward, resting both hands on the table. The room felt charged with fear and regret. This was their moment of reckoning. I cleared my throat. You've all focused on the symptoms, corrupted backups, cascading server failures, deadlocked data streams. You've thrown money at consultants, patched and repatched modules, but the root cause eludes you. I clicked my pen and drew a small circle in my notebook. That circle is not a bug, it's a feature, a kill switch I designed during the initial code rollout. A murmur rippled around the table. A feature, the interim CEO repeated, voice trembling. I nodded. Back then, I foresaw the possibility that this system might one day be exploited or spiral out of control. I built a failsafe deep within the authentication and synchronization layers, a sequence of commands that would initiate a controlled shutdown. I tapped the circle. It lay dormant, encrypted within legacy code that modern developers never audited. When you upgraded the firmware last quarter, you unknowingly reactivated the pathway I'd long since embedded. I watched their faces drain of color. Someone at the far end, the head of IT, stammered, "But why would you design a kill switch that brings your own system down?" I fixed him with a steady gaze. Because created empires can become tyrants. Unchecked systems, no matter how brilliant, can devastate everything they were meant to serve. I wanted a way to hit pause if the machine ever turned against the people who relied on it. The room was silent as a tomb. I opened my notebook to the page with the cluster diagram, then swiped across it. The screen behind me updated to show a simplified flowchart of their entire network. "Here," I said, pointing to a single node. "This is the master kill switch. When the anonymous alert hit your security team, they applied what they thought was a patch, but it was a Trojan, my Trojan. It propagated the command sequence across every dependent service. That's why you saw simultaneous failures in authentication, data replication, and logging." I let that sink in. The interim CEO rubbed his temples. "So you orchestrated this entire meltdown." His accusation hung heavy. I met his gaze without flinching. "I didn't set out to destroy you. I needed you to see how dangerously blind you were to the foundation beneath your feet. You erased the history of this company. You rewrote the narrative, claiming credit for innovations you never conceived. You believed yourselves architects, but you were merely caretakers of a house you never built." My words stabbed at their wounded pride. A board member, the legal counsel, piped up in a quavering voice. "If this is your failsafe, can you reverse it? Can you save us?" I closed my notebook and looked around the table. Their fear was palpable. "I can restore the system," I said finally, "but on one condition: you rebuild your leadership on transparency and respect for the past. You will audit every line of legacy code, consult with those who wrote it, and honor the company's original charter. Only then will I initiate the rollback sequence." They exchanged glances, desperation mingled with relief. The room's tension shifted from deathly quiet to frantic debate. The interim CEO leaned forward, voice urgent. "We accept your terms, we'll grant you full access. We'll convene an advisory council of former engineers, just please save the system." I nodded slowly. "Good, then let's begin." I tapped the table and the network diagram transformed into a command prompt ready for input. Then I paused, resting a hand atop my notebook and looked each of them in the eye. "One more thing." The weight of my words coated the room. "I am Arthur Wynn. I founded this company. Every line of code running through this network was born from my mind. You dismissed the old man wandering your halls as senile. You stripped my name from the corridors, but you cannot erase the architect." My voice was calm but carried the force of decades. The executives sat frozen, jaws slack, realizing the truth they'd tried to bury. Silence reigned. The only sound was the hum of the city beyond the glass walls, a reminder that the world continued even as these leaders confronted their own hubris. I closed my notebook and tapped the keyboard. "Shall we?" The interim CEO nodded, tears of relief glistening in his eyes. As I began typing the rollback commands, I felt a measure of forgiveness thaw in my chest. The system would live again, but not as it once was. It would bear the scars of this lesson. And the world would remember that the architect always knows where the foundation lies. And that respect for history is the true master key. I paused my fingers over the keyboard and let the boardroom settle into a tense hush. The rollback routine was cued, waiting for my approval, but that wasn't enough. They needed to understand that this wasn't simply a technical fix, it was a moral reckoning. I swiveled in my chair and faced the interim CEO first, then the entire assembly. Before I restore your system, there are conditions, I said, voice calm but ironclad. You will remove the current leadership, the executives and managers who dismissed me, who erased your own history. They have proven themselves unfit to guide this company. A ripple of shock passed through the room. The interim CEO's hands clenched the edge of the table. But they're our board members, he stammered. We can't just fire them all. I leaned forward. You can and you must. Their arrogance brought you to ruin. If you cling to them, you'll repeat the same mistakes. Replace them with people who understand what this institution was founded to achieve, not just short-term profits and flashy launches. I watched their faces drain of color. They knew I spoke the truth. I let the silence stretch until the head of legal cleared her throat. And the original values, she asked hesitantly. I nodded. You will publicly reaffirm the company charter I wrote. You will open your code repositories for regular audits by engineers, both veteran and new hires. You will establish a council of former and current developers to vet every major update. You will restore my name to the building, to the halls where I once sketched out these concepts on scraps of paper. You will host annual retrospectives celebrating the company's origins. Above all, you will emphasize integrity and humility over hype and arrogance. A murmur of agreement followed, tinged with desperation. The interim CEO stood, voice wavering. If we agree to these terms, you'll execute the rollback and guide us through the recovery. I tapped the rollback command on the screen. Yes, but make no mistake, I will be watching. If any of you backslide, if you replace humility with hubris again, the kill switch stays active. I hold the master keys. I let that sink in. Their eyes widened at the weight of my threat. I pressed enter. The terminal feed scrolled as the system began to revert, patches unfurling like a blanket, restoring order to chaos. Firewalls reassembled, data clusters reconnected, authentication modules lit up one by one. Engineers at the console beside me let out sighs of relief, some wiping tears from their cheeks as the errors vanished. But I didn't allow myself to relax. My gaze swept the board to ensure every promise was sealed. This was bigger than code. It was the soul of everything I'd built. When the final confirmation appeared, I closed the terminal. The network flickered back to life, humming with restored stability. The interim CEO exhaled shakily. It's done, he whispered. I nodded once. Good, now begin the leadership transition immediately. Issue a public statement acknowledging your mistakes, apologize to every employee and stakeholder, and unveil the new governance structure. Invite all former engineers back to contribute their wisdom. Then we will rebuild trust and innovation together. He closed his eyes and bowed his head. Agreed. The rest of the room echoed his assent, quiet and solemn. As I stood, I felt the old weight of exile lift from my shoulders. The skyline beyond the windows looked different somehow, not just a backdrop for profit, but a canvas for possibility. I reclaimed more than my dignity in that moment. I reclaimed the true essence of my life's work. This company would no longer be a monument to the arrogance of the present. It would be a living testament to the vision of its founder and the collective spirit of everyone who believed in it. I gathered my notebook and rose from the chair. They would remember today as the turning point, the price of forgetting they paid, and the price of remembering they vowed to honor. As I walked out of the boardroom, the hum of restored systems followed me like an old friend's greeting. The empire stood on new ground now, forged by humility, respect, and the unwavering knowledge that the architect's memory is the bedrock of true progress.